fifth episode of Black Girl's Blueprint for Maternal Health. At this series, we bring to you from the Revived Community Health Center, as well as the Black Millennial for Flint. I am Ezra Tillman. I'm the president and founder of Revived Community Health Center, as well as the pastor of the First Trinity Missionary Baptist Church, downtown Flint in Genesee County. And we are glad today to come as we observe this Men's Health Month, and with some well-groomed, educated Black kings today. We're gonna hold a conversation and take over this Black girl space and make sure we give a chance to come behind the scene and have a little conversation, a little talk we would have in the barbershop. So you get a chance to get in our world and get our perspective, our mind, and see that some of us are actually intellectual as well as emotional about how we feel about our families and how we lead them. Our conversation focus today is on the health experience of Black and brown men, boys, and fathers, and for families for that matter. And we want to make sure today we navigate through the environmental injustice that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, as well as today, all men we are supporting as we celebrate fatherhood and the journey of fatherhood. And for most of us, we know that looks in so many different colors. However, that's the purpose why we're here today, to share our perspectives, our background experience that's very rich and part of our culture. So today, we're about to allow you to join in with us as we share on this panel, and I want to share these particular guys, but I don't want to do no robbery. I want to give them the opportunity themselves to express and to introduce themselves so you can know and follow and get used to seeing these faces and these names in the future. We want to start with Mr. Mark, and then we'll go to David, and then we'll go to William, and then we'll come back and we'll start our conversation for tonight.
Thank you so much, Pastor Tillman. Thank you for having me. First of all, just want to say it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Reverend Mark Stanton, and I am a husband, a father, a social worker that has been working with family unification, reunification, stabilization, and empowerment mainly for our Black families. So I just, again, want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for being here, and look forward to the conversation.
Hey, how y'all doing? Glad to be in the building with such dynamic and iconic leaders. I'm David Miller. I hail from the great city of Baltimore, Maryland, currently living in Washington, D.C., wear a couple hats: husband, father, researcher, doing some research at Morgan State University on non-residential Black fathers raising daughters, as well as using children's books. I write children's books to create narrative change around the importance of Black fathers, because historically, Black fathers have not been incorporated in children's books, particularly children's books for young readers. So I also write children's books and do a great deal of consulting, both on the federal level with National Responsible Father Clearinghouse, and do some consulting with local groups across the country. But excited about being part of this conversation.
Yes, sir. Mr. William.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I'm William Moore. I'm the Race and Health Equity Administrator for Ramsey County in the city of St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm also a doula and lactation educator, ex-football player, yoga practitioner, EIDO practitioner. And I'm just really about being in spaces like this, driving forth the work of birth work, especially from a male's perspective, making sure that it's understood that men are a vital part of the family unit. I know that there's seems to be a mission or an agenda out there these days to exclude fathers from the picture, but to let it be known and well known that we are a part of the picture, an important part of the picture. And to make sure that I change the narrative and the paradigm about who we are as individuals, who we are as figures in our community, and what we are building towards for the future.
My man, 100 grand. I like how you start things out, man. Let people know I'm standing my ground. It's where I'm coming from. This is how I feel about it. I appreciate it. I want to start, number one, to say to everybody, happy Father's Day. We salute you, Black man, with the fist. Be it whatever the circumstance is, we understand more than anybody else in society what it takes and what it looks like. And as it's been stated very clearly, in our particular culture now, we are being feminized, we're being neutered, we're being overlooked. And whatever the case is, there's still some people here that's shaping the narrative and doing the work to make sure that we're still setting models in our community and we're doing it the right way. I'm a child of a Southerner, and so I came with the old school way. And I still have a strong perspective as it pertains to what my meaning is to a family as pertains to a husband and a father. And I'm not apologetic about it. I don't care who offends. And I understand people are sensitive, hypersensitive, but I realize as well, we're not producing men anymore. And for those who complain about men, you're missing, or you either hurting because of the lack of manhood you had in your life. So it is needed, it is necessary, and we're going to talk about it. So again, salute you, all fathers. We appreciate you, and we're praying for you through your struggle, as well as to the Black and Brown. We realize that our community is very colorful as pertains to our experiences, and we realize when it comes to our challenges and our environments, when it looks like to debunk whatever society have said about us. Our goal today is to share that, and I want to make sure these intelligent Black men get a chance to articulate and to share with us today, as we share with you the misconceptions and the myths that is shaping around fatherhood, Black fatherhood, from that perspective, because Black men is talking today, and as well as Black families. So as we start out, I want to start out with Brother Dave, because he's the educator. He's the one now engulfed in the work, and he's doing this day and night, and it's in his mind. I already know he probably spitting this stuff out in his dreams. Whatever the case is, want to make sure he help us right now as we shape this picture of how do we debunk these myths and these theories about fathers and the Black family. I want to start with you, and then we'll come back around and catch on the other end.
Super important question, and definitely want to hear what the other brothers in the building have to say. But first and foremost, let me just say that no one is coming to save us. We are the Black men and women that our ancestors prayed for. And so it's time for us to move beyond Democrat, Republican. It's time to move beyond fraternal affiliation or even the church you go to, and realize that if we're going to win in this country in terms of producing healthy children and build healthy communities, families are at the backbone of everything that we do, right? So there's a couple things that's really important. Number one, I'm gonna be real brief. We have a PR problem in Black America because we tend to lead with the absent daddy narrative. And while there are countless numbers of absent Black fathers, white fathers, Latino fathers, the stories that you see appearing on the New York Times, in the New York Times magazine, or the Washington Post or the LA Times, or some of the other major media outlets in the respective cities that you represent, they always lead with the absent Black father. There've been a whole host of documentaries on the Black father. There've been a whole bunch of doctoral dissertations. I probably read 150 doctoral dissertations on the absent Black father in the last 6 months. But what we don't talk about is the data. The Center for Disease Control in 2013 report issued that Black fathers are more involved in their children's daily life than fathers of any other racial group. We're talking about bathing children, going to debate practice, basketball practice, cheerleading practice, coming home and doing the read aloud story time. Now, those dads might not necessarily all live in the home, but we know from a data standpoint that Black fathers are more involved than we're sharing in the narrative. And so part of what we got to do, bold Black men, unapologetic Black men and women, we have to be masters of our own media. We can't wait for CNN to tell the story about all of these Black men that are taking care of their children. And so I think that one, we got to address this PR problem in our community. It's something really simple, and I'll turn it back to Pastor Tillman. We should be inundating our social media platforms with images of Black fathers that we know, that we work with, that we've met. But all too often, we lead with stories of drama, trauma, and foolishness.
Wow. I told you we're going to start off hot. I'm going to go to Reverend Mark, and then we're going to come back to William, whatever, because I appreciate that you shared how to change the narrative, not only about debunking it and addressing it. However, facts and numbers are numbers, but how do we help others to understand how to change the narrative from their own ignorance? So again, Reverend Mark, and then we go to Brother Williams, and then we'll come back with our second question.
Well, first of all, I want to say that, man, that was an awesome tape, and so much words of wisdom. He only said what I wanted to say, just better. I mean, again, referring back to some of the very same numbers in terms of the CDC numbers, some of those numbers have been skewed and taken in a certain lens to say, oh, we got this problem of 70% of Black fathers are absent, and to look at that data accurately and unpack that data and see the reality of it. It takes doing a little more homework than just seeing everything at face value. And exactly like he said, we have a PR problem, and I think, just to take that a step further, in terms of how do we change this narrative? How do we help others to recognize this narrative? And one of the things that I've tried to do in my own life to help debunk these myths, exactly like he said, is posting those stories on social media. But again, I try to take it a step further, is relationally recognizing I may not even know the guy that's over there with his family, but I just wanted to say, hey, Black man, I just want to let you know I see you being a good dad. I just want to recognize you. We ain't gotta have a long, drawn out conversation. I recognize you being a good dad and your life debunking that stereotype. So there was an article by John Leves, and it was saying that basically he was saying he was doing this article in order to debunk those myths in terms of this Black fathers not being in the home. And in that article, he was saying there are so many things when we take that statistic at face value, saying that, you know what, they just aren't there. But again, when there are reasons in terms of, so for instance, if the statistic says that based on that statistic, 70% of Black fathers are not present. If that's what the statistic says, it does not take into consideration that fathers may be present even if they are in the household. Or some statistics can even be skewed, because if a father is noted to be in the household, then it could in turn take away from the services that are provided by the family. So if they're looking at, oh, they're not in the household because they aren't married, they may not be married, but that surely does not mean that they are not in the household and present. And so again, those narratives we need to make sure those narratives are corrected. We need to make sure that our narratives are known, and we need to make sure that we're sharing with other fathers that it is real and it is present, these fathers in the homes. And like you said, again, couldn't have said it any better myself. Statistics show that Black men are the single most involved of any major noted race. So absolutely, I echo what he said and just add that snippet to it.
Yeah, I hope I keep this in mind as I come back around to Brother William, whatever, but I think that we have cracked something open that needs to be addressed. But come on, Brother William, let's hear your spiel on it, man.
Yeah, so I think about it in terms of three different spaces of narrative, value set, and presence, right? And what I mean by narrative is very much kind of building off what, Mr. Miller and Mr. Stanton just talked about, as far as like controlling the narrative. Stop letting the narrative get out there that, that we're not available, we're not doing anything, we're, taking data that hasn't been disaggregated, right? Because data can say, if you're not looking at data correctly, data can say whatever you want it to do. That's why I always warn people about looking at data. Like, yeah, when you look at data at the surface level without disaggregating it, yeah, you look at it as Black fathers are actually, more likely to not be married to our partners or the mother of our children, but we know that that's also been incentivized by certain government policies and stuff that have been put in place, right? But once you disaggregate that data and look into more details, again, Mr. Miller was absolutely correct. Black fathers are more present than any other father there, any other father that is there. Also, and really paying attention to that narrative is very important. I'm gonna tell you specifically why. Because what happened is we've allowed that narrative to be so prevalent that we have sisters in our own community who are parroting that same message, right? And so it's tough when you got brothers out here who feel like they're up against the world, fighting everybody in the world. The system is against them and everything. But then when you come back on your own community and you feel like your sisters, your own sisters, women in your community that don't look like that do look like you, also parroting the same message, then that hurts even more. It's not to excuse and say that we don't have brothers who are in our community that are not handling their responsibility. We absolutely do, but so do brothers in other communities have that same issue. And this is where the issue of presence comes into play, right? Yes, we have brothers. We have our fathers are more present in the lives of our children than any other men, a group of men or demographic than men that are out there. But we also, many of us know and talk about, I've heard this saying, it takes a village to raise a child, right? It takes a village to raise a child. For us brothers who are in our community, actively involved in our child's life, you know what I'm saying? What type of example, or how are we reaching out to support those sisters and those families where the brothers ain't really taking care of business? How can we be role models and be help to those sisters and families that are out there? You know what I'm saying? We're talking about it takes a village, but we're constantly isolating ourselves away from people in our community. We must realize that is not a cultural, really a cultural trait of Black people, of enslaved Africans. You know what I mean? Like, that is a very like colonized Western mindset cultural trait of individualism and stuff like that. We're not like that. We're not a people that are like that, right? So I also think that we can help mitigate that by being more of a presence in the lives of other children in the community, whether they're our kids or not. I'm not saying that we got to go out there and we got to be, necessarily putting groceries in the homes of everybody, in our community out there. It would be nice if we had the means to, but we're not obligated to do so. But how can you be there, be a steady figure, a guiding light, and somebody in a community for our children out there, that our sisters who don't have as much, don't have the luck of having, some of our brothers who yet to find their way. We'll call them wayward cats, out there. How can we fill that void for them until those fathers seem to really figure out what it is that they need, how they need to get themselves together, and step in and do what they need to do. And then I think about things like in terms of, how are we showing up ourselves in terms of like what we're valuing. I think about something that, Mr. Stanton said earlier in terms of like social media, and Mr. Miller also said in terms of the type of stuff that we value and promote. Now, it's real easy. I don't even have a Facebook, but I know people who do. It's real easy to get on social media or whatever and look up something. We love to give our attention and pay attention to anything that has drama in it out there, especially as it revolves around us.
Yes, sir.
Capitalist America knows it too, which is why they sell it to us, right?
That's right.
You ever notice when there is a young brother gets brutalized or shot or killed by the police, we retweet that stuff. The news replays that stuff 10, 12, 15, 100 times, all in one day. Now, I refuse to continue looking at that type of stuff because I already know what happened. I know what goes on. To me, it's Black trauma porn, right?
That's what it is,
Never
man.
do that. They don't do that with other demographics or races of people.
Call it,
They
man.
only do that with us. Why? Because we buy into that mess too. We you know what I'm saying? Like we consume that. We seem to enjoy that for some way, and I think that comes to like our value set. We got to start valuing ourselves and our community a little bit more in terms of what do we see as more important? Do we see it as more important to value the holistic approach of how we have a lot of brothers out there doing the good thing, doing the good things, being there for our community, being there for our kids, being there for our partners, our churches, our places of work, business, different stuff like that? Or are we going to continue to glamorize, perpetuate and push out the narrative and help circulate the images and the videos of those that are doing opposite, right? We don't seem to think it's so cool. It takes me back to the thought process of when we were younger. And I see this as a prevalent issue in our community too. It wasn't cool to be the smart kid, right? It wasn't cool to be the wrong thing. You picked on that kid. He wasn't cool. But the one that was wilding out, doing all that type of stuff, like they say, it's the one who acts up the most that gets the most attention. We seem to really perpetuate that as adults too, right? And so we need to really I think we need to also take a look at ourselves individually and also within our community about what do we want to place a value on? Do we want to place a value on the mess, the drama, the garbage, or we want to place a value on the good deeds and the positive things that we know and see about our community every day? Once we start pushing that, and devouring that as much as we devour everything else, we also start to see it turn in other ways too, right? Once the drama stops selling, they'll start producing it. We stop consuming it. So what are we valuing?
I think you hit on it, man. And when you mentioned about, the values, whatever, and you said it, I want to make sure I jump back on it because I think it's very important, because it's space not only to speak to people outside of our particular culture, but it's to speak to our culture so we can address it. Now we have a voice, we have a microphone to actually say it. Number one, I've always said this, I continue to say this, and with all due respect, because I have learned of the importance and the beauty of Black mothers as pertains to children. Anyway, these are nurturers, our teachers, our preachers. I mean, from knee high to grasshopper, this person has poured into us and kind of groomed us. If it wasn't that, it was Big Mom. It was somebody that was from that perspective to do it. But one thing that always helped our community was our own Black women understood our struggle. They understood the struggle of their sons. They understood the struggles of their husbands, even if they was defunct, or if they was detached, or if they was mentally stressed out, or whatever the case is, because now we call it mental illness, whatever the case is. We know the trauma, as you stated, in our lives have produced different things, as it would for anybody in any culture. However, because now we're in a feminist environment, which now womanist is erasing male, period. This is an issue we're having that makes it worse for us to even have this conversation about what fatherhood means and what the family looks like. Secondly, you made a valuable point that we have structures that have been put in place to take, in the Black family, the man out of the family. That is not the issues in any other ethnic background but us. Strategically, this has been things that have replaced us or removed us for the benefits of survival of our children, from welfare to cocaine, heroin in a neighborhood that made it from across seas to 103rd on 10th Street, wherever the case is. We know it's been a systematic move to remove us from our families. So when we start talking about our values, we have to definitely not only address what we are feeding and we're looking into, but looking what we're doing to ourselves in our own homes. What you're doing to your own sons, what you're doing to your husband. You're saying you need to be a certain kind of way, and he's looking at you to be nurtured, and you're the one that's trying to put a pan upside his head. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you saying that narrative, man, about values. It's definitely needed and something that needs to be addressed in our community. I want to push Neil. Go ahead. Something to say.
I was going to say, it's just absolutely right. Like, I just always like to, with paying attention and recognize that, yes, we have a lot of outside structures, influences really trying to negatively impact the Black community. I always like to look at what can we also do for ourselves within first, right? That we work internally, while also it's a both and. Work internally, prioritize what we can do internally, while also working externally. Because if we just depend on the external, listen, Black people done been in America for what's about 403 years now. We've been waiting 403 years for them to get their mind right and treat us appropriately. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not really willing to wait another 403 years.
Yeah, we overplaying
for incremental change.
Yes,
so
sir.
what can we do, within our own power in-house first, while we wait to address, while we allow them to get themselves together and while we address that.
Yes, sir. Here we go, fellas. Our next segment we want to deal with when it comes to hardworking fathers. I'm a father as well. I didn't get a chance to say that I have 4 boys. And on top of that, whatever the loss of my sister-in-law, I took in my nephew. So I got some great responsibility in this house pertains to contributing to society from Black men. With that being said, trying to work, pastor, lead the conversation that we're having today in our community, other spaces, as well as make our efforts to push the needle and revive. We know it's an issue with balance for us. And so when it gets to us prioritizing our health and our self-care, which I'm right now doing this COVID experience, I try to make sure I try to cut meat and eat more vegetables and drink more water and all the above. Since we've been dealing with this for 2 years now, and we know the things we're dealing with in our community of those particulars that don't believe or trust the healthcare system due to rightful purpose pertaining to our ethnic background. I want to ask you, during this pandemic, has there been any additional barriers that you can identify as pertains to us getting to a place of being more aware of wellness and health? And during this time, can you share what you have learned, how it's impacted your family as pertains to the Black family at large as well? Again, anybody who feels you want to jump in, what barriers or additional barriers that have come into our lives for those who are men and fathers and workers who are trying to balance priorities of yourself along with how do you address that as pertains to your family that you feel responsible for and making sure that they're well as well.
Sure, I can speak to that, Pastor Tillman. In terms of so statistically, really, I don't have the statistics on hand, but statistically, we've seen a significant uptick in in our mental health, mental illness, struggles with mental health. That has been an uptick for everybody. That's an uptick across the board for everybody. But because of those, like you said, because there is a distrust that the Black community has for the health system at large, with good reason, because of that, you have more individuals from the Black community that need the services, but are less likely to get the services because of that lack of trust. And so one of the things that I have tried to do, and also working with some of the individuals in the mental health arena, is attempted to just kind of, I don't want to say be a whistleblower, but just kind of make people aware. So for instance, there is when individuals with Medicaid want to get mental health services, a Black man can call in and say, hey, I'm looking for mental health services. They need to have a mental health screening. What we found is that a lot of times it's difficult for them to get the therapy, the psychology that they need. Now, it's hard enough, right, for a Black man to get to the point where he admits that he needs the help. When he finally admits that he needs the help, makes the phone call to get the help, then we run into the issue of now those same perceptions, when we talked about that PR earlier. So those same perceptions, that same narrative, which we are attempting to control, we can't always control all of it. So some of it, there are some of those media outlets that we aren't able to control. Some of the movies that we see, we aren't always able to control, and they have labeled oftentimes our Black men as stronger. They've labeled our Black men as not being afraid, not being fearful, too tough, thugs. And so by them being identified in such a light, let's shed that light on the screening. So when that screening happens for a Black man, then you have the person that's doing this screening to determine whether or not this Black man needs services. The light, that the lens that they're seeing through, should I say it that way? The lens that they're seeing through is you tough, you strong. And so not even realizing the fact that I'm even making this phone call should tell you something, right? Because I'm not broke down on the side of the road. I'm just letting you know that I need help. A lot of times, because of the perception, the narrative that's being cast, we found that there are a lot of Black men that are being turned away from the services when they finally do make the call and say, I need the help, are being turned away from the services, essentially saying, well, you don't sound like it's that bad. It don't sound like it's that much of a problem. But a lot of it is really wrapped up in the perception of the individual who may be screening, who more than likely is a white female. So because of how they see the Black man, when they finally look to get the services that they need as much or more than their white counterpart, then we find that there are so many hurdles and barriers in place to them getting the services, which is really sad. So one of the things that I've tried to do is try to help and coach some of our Black men in terms of what are the things to say, how do you open up? Because a lot of times that's one of the issues. If our Black men aren't willing to open up and be honest about their struggles, then they don't score what they need to score on the assessment in order to get the services. But if nobody knows that, if nobody told you that, if you're not coached in terms of what to say, and you are still dealing with this trust barrier, then you find yourselves unable to get the services that you are rightly owed, that anybody else in any other community is getting with the same issues or lesser issues. So that certainly has provided some barriers. One of the things that I think, as the brother said, in terms of us making sure that we are the go-between, that we're encouraging other brothers, that we're encouraging other sons, that we're encouraging other fathers, so they can see and understand, sharing our struggles. A lot of times we don't want to share, right? A lot of times we want to keep things bottled up. But again, I think that it still goes back to the narrative that is preached to us, the narrative that we are seen at. And so the narrative affects, let's say, the screener. The narrative affects the person that is doing this assessment on us. But guess who else the narrative affects? The narrative affects, just like you guys said, it affects our Black women and how they look at us and how they perceive us. And guess what? Who else that trickles down to? We all know it affects the kids and how our children look at us. And so when the world is looking at us a certain way, guess what happens? So once the world has told me that I'm no good, that I'm not there, that I don't need help, it's not okay to cry, it's not okay to feel this way, then all of a sudden, when I do feel that way, I feel like I'm full of inadequate feelings and nowhere else to share that. And we have to debunk that myth to say that there's no safe place to share. And as Black men, we have to provide the safe space for other Black men. So I think that's a huge opportunity in sharing, reshaping that narrative and recreating, again, as the brother so wisely said, recreating that sense of presence.
I appreciate that, man. I think it's a good segue to try to jump real quick. I want to ask Brother David, because I know we've been talking for a minute, get a chance to get back into conversation, mix it up. I'm gonna come right back to you, Brother William. But share with us, your perspective, how it may has impacted your work, how you've seen maybe some tips you picked up along the way. Because personally, myself, I had one of those moments, and I make it transparent as possible, and I preach it. I believe in Jesus and a therapist. So share with us what you think, man, about how you shape and see this picture for us as men in our community.
So really impactful question, brothers. And I'm just sitting here taking some notes because I'm working on a couple projects that I want to circle back to all three of you about. So a couple of things, man. I'm gonna try to wrap this up in 90 seconds. So number one, I think when I'm listening to the brothers, I'm reminded of one of our master teachers, W.B. Du Bois, who talked about the talented 10th. And Du Bois talked about the talented 10th in the Black community from the standpoint of those of us who are educated, who have positions, who have the information, have a historical and a moral responsibility to reach back into our community. So when we look at what happened, and it's still happening during COVID and the pandemic, one of the things that I found, and I'm sure many of you would agree, is that many of the Black organizations that are entrusted with doing the life-giving, life-saving working community were just not ready, just like so many organizations in this country. So one of the things that I'm a big proponent of is that we also gotta do some capacity building with grassroots organizations to be able to better respond to issues around mental health, maternal health, parenting, youth development, and all of the other issues that are related to fatherhood and families. Because I think what ends up happening is we tend to rely on many grassroots organizations to do the heavy lifting, and they're not necessarily ready. And so one of the things that I've figured out over COVID, and I'm just going to share this as a strategy, is I have found that connecting with dads virtually has really been a breath of fresh air. Because any of us who do fatherhood work know sometimes it's really hard to get the brothers to come to the center for a small group or one-on-one. I have found that connecting with guys virtually on their cell phones, because not a whole lot of cats really got flip phones anymore, right? So most people got a smartphone, right, so they can download, Zoom or whatever the case may be. But I found, have been able to have some great success with community brothers in different cities using virtual technology and doing even larger virtual groups connecting Black men across the country. I just don't believe this notion that you hear a lot of times that Black men are a difficult population to serve. I just think that a lot of times we don't have relationships with the Black men that are hardest, the Black men, the Black fathers that are hardest to reach in our community. And so again, I just think that there's a lot of work that we got to do in terms of strengthening those organizations in our community. I know we got, I think, 1 or 2 pastors in the building. I don't even want to talk to a church or a church leader that doesn't have some kind of fatherhood initiative in-house or connected to a community-based fatherhood organization, because I think that the needs of our community are so great. In the city I grew up in, Baltimore, church on every corner. And so I think we also got to figure out ways to empower and leverage relationships with the faith community to get some of this work done and to stop relying on some of these larger organizations. And I know some people are gonna get mad and gonna watch this, that are sucking up all of this grant money and are not producing the necessary outcomes. And I'll just stop there.
You're absolutely right. And I want to throw this in before I throw it to Brother Williams, because this is very important. And this is something that's happening in our community that we want to address as well. When we deal with issues such as what is needed for fatherhood, what is needed for manhood, what is needed to cultivate and to give it a space for that to work, most intellectual, professional Black men aren't available to do that in their own place of worship. And so that's an indictment to us as well, to our fraternities, as well as to Mason halls and everything else who believes in that particular work. We're absent in the places, and we're not providing those resources or those skill sets we have ourselves there, but we point the fingers at it. I talk all the time to guys, whatever. I say, hey man, what you doing at your church? We here working together, doing this in the community, however, but you have those issues at your own church home. And so, as you said, the grassroots places that are being sought after for the answers don't have the resource from their own people, and we don't support it financially or either with our intellectual abilities. So I'm gonna give it to you, Brother Williams, as well, to make sure that we state that, because we need to be part of NAACP, we need to be part of Urban League and everywhere else like that, because we understand what it means, but we can't point fingers if we don't invest. Come on, Brother Williams. Brother Williams,
so,
sorry about that.
As I think about your question, you talked about, what we have done differently or what we do, especially during the age of COVID. And everybody we understand about, the systematic structural racism there's in a healthcare system that is caused trauma that made, Black men and Black women and people of color in general reluctant to engage with our healthcare system. But I also think about it in terms of what I want to focus on, and what I've been doing with my colleagues here is really focusing on capacity and the vulnerability of our Black men when it comes to how can we really address their needs and stuff like that. And what I mean by that is like capacity, right? Like, I don't care how much you say a brother needs to talk to somebody, talks about how he needs therapy, how he needs this, how he needs that, when he's dealing with, the outside pressures of having to provide for himself and his family and pay bills during a time of COVID, when a lot of people's funds were, cut short. People were dealing with reduced hours, or people were being laid off, right? So, how do you build that capacity to even make space for them to do that? A brother's not really trying to hear you about go talk to somebody or go do this and go do that when his partner and his kids is hungry at home, or the lights is cut off, or they don't know if they're going to be evicted, within a couple of months. So how can we provide the resources and things that they need, the opportunities and things that they need in their community, so they can relieve some of that stress? And then we can start to have the conversation about, all right, now let's talk about how you're doing mentally and emotionally. What else? What can we provide to you, and what can we do for you mentally and emotionally? Earlier it was referenced about mental health being a serious issue, and we've seen the numbers spiked up during COVID. It's exactly why. You know why? Because capacity, right? Because a lot of people don't realize, everybody likes to say that they look at themselves and they deal with their stuff, but they really don't. Everybody takes a very superficial look at what their issues and stuff. They don't like to go deep, because if they realize if they go deep, they're going to find out some stuff about themselves that they don't like. And what they've been doing is, before COVID, you were able to hide it with staying busy. Being a workaholic, because being a workaholic is a way of dealing with trauma. It ain't just drugs, alcohol, and sex that is the only ways you deal with trauma. Sometimes you do it by being a workaholic, right? Sometimes you do it by going to happy hour, watching football, basketball games all the time. Keep yourself so busy that you don't have to deal with the things deep, dark within that you've been trouble with and not have to deal with. What happened is, with COVID, when the whole world shut down, and you had nothing else to you can only watch so many reruns of a TV show. You can only play video games so much before that voice that you've been drowning out and staying distracted from gets loud. It gets loud and you can't run from it no more. And what we saw is people, those mental health issues, people acting out on that voice, not being able to handle those things that they weren't able to deal with, right? And so again, it's about building that capacity first and foremost before we can allow them to deal with that. And then also, talk about vulnerability, right? We're also living in a world where, what I'm saying, our brothers are taught like your value as a man is wrapped up solely in your ability to provide for your family. That your value as a man is solely wrapped up in your ability to be hardcore all the time, not have feelings, not be sensitive, not be able to cry, not show emotion, not show this or that. Almost just be like this militaristic robot type of cat. You know what I mean? And we just know that that's not realistic as human beings. That's just simply not how it works out, right?
That's right.
I've had to say this. I've had to have this discussion when I do co-parenting situations with families, when I do my birth work as a doula. And I've had to tell, like, young ladies, stop telling your son not to cry. Stop, when your husband finally, wants to open up or talk about something, stop telling him to man up. Stop telling him to do this and stop telling him to do that. Because that's a real part of him that you're going to want to take, that you're going to need at some point in time. You can't raise little boys and talk to your man. I've told a lady before, you can't raise your little boy and talk to your man 23 hours of the day, fussing at him, telling him, pretending, conditioning him that he need to be like Tupac. And then all of a sudden, when you and your feelings, you want to flip a switch and he got to behave like Marvin Gaye. That ain't how it worked.
Yes, sir.
You condition him to be hard the whole time. So now when you need him to be sensitive, he don't know how to do it. And he's telling you to toughen up. And now you're in your feelings, and there's a problem with that. No, we need to start treating everybody like human beings because we all are human beings. So really it's about what are we doing too? A, to create that capacity, but B, to also, and set the environment for our brothers to be vulnerable, right? You know what I mean? Checking on our brothers. Are you okay? It's all right to tell your son or whatever, like, I love you. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. Like, you hurt. It makes sense too. I understand your feelings is hurt. You know what I mean? You depressed. I get it. That makes sense too. Stop telling people to, throw dirt on stuff and move past it. Process those emotions.
Yes, sir.
Because anybody will tell you who knows anything about normal human development, we have to go through these different stages of life and we have to process your emotions. Because if you don't process your emotions, I promise you, my dad always told me 2 things in life are undefeated: time and nature. You'll never defeat either one of them. You know what I'm saying? And the emotional part being the nature. If you do not allow young men and men to process their emotions at the time that they're having them, I promise you it will come out at a different time. And you may not like when it comes out, and you definitely won't like how it comes out.
Yes, I appreciate that. I think you made a valid point about that. I'm still trying to process the whole point you're saying about the capacity, because, not be able to deal with how to respond with talking to a therapist versus you dealing with the struggle of feeding your children, because that's still the overspill about how do I still find a way to keep myself with the absence of being able to do. And that's our situation, right? We can't see things because we see this mountain in front of us. But it's a good segue I want to jump into real quick, because this deals with Black men being human, right? So with that being said, and I got to give a shameless plug. My wife took on this role as the CEO of our healthcare center, has done a wonderful job, has built a great staff, has produced some wonderful results and turned around some statistics here in our particular county of Genesee as well. We're dealing with decreasing maternal and infant mortality and mobility rates, and we have seen that's been a bigger focus now about health disparities in our community. With that being said, one thing about that factor, I remember that dealing with the process of the wife going through pregnancy, we don't acknowledge what the husband goes through during her pregnancy, what the father goes through during her pregnancy. And with that being said, I remember one day I got sick as a dog. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, I was no good to call off work. I mean, I don't even know. I ate something bad. I don't know what's going on, man. It was a bad situation. But, one of the old school adages, you find out, like, she's sick, you get sick. So she get big, you get big too. So it ain't just her going through these emotional, mental changes and developing or becoming. You're going through your own process, and no one gives the lens of the father being human, emotional, stressed out, worrying, concerned. And so with that being said, as it pertains to fatherhood, I want you to give your perspective. And I know you've done this work, and I know some of you are fathers as well. I want us to share real quick, and especially for those who have daughters as well. I want us to think about how we deal with the mental health side, preparing and developing, cultivating our sons and daughters. And with that being said, about fathers, discussing what issues you're going through And what advice you'll give to a new dad who comes on the scene of how to deal with those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, as you kind of said, this is definitely my space. This is definitely my field. So I'll talk about it in like two different phases. So you're absolutely 100% correct. It's a misconception out there that the mothers are the only ones who go through physical, biological, or physical, chemical, and emotional changes during pregnancy and during the birth of a child. Fathers do too. And it's why I always caution, the folks that I work with, the families I work with, when a father's excited and happy about having a baby, he's talking about we having a baby. I've heard people shut them down. Your feet ain't swelling. Your back ain't hurting. You ain't this. You ain't that. You know what I mean? Like, you ain't pregnant. Stop shutting cats down like that. Because for one, you do several things like that. You really disrespect his role in the process. And two, what you're doing is you're conditioning him over the course of this pregnancy, and society does it as a whole. Fathers have nothing to contribute to the process other than helping to create the child and then disciplining and financially taking care of the child after it's born. And then somehow we get upset when the baby is born and the father manifests that same energy in the relationship. Well, what have you been getting? Logically, we know that it takes more than those things to help raise a child. But what have you been conditioning him to think over this whole period? And that's why a lot of our fathers take a back seat in that space, because they don't feel like it's their space to really do so. And so really having a conversation with families, I have the conversation with families that like, yo, dad is going to go through these same things, and making sure that they both understand that, because there's going to be a time where mom is going to have to support dad is going to have to support mom. Dads go through postpartum depression too. It looks like, being quick to anger and being aloof. And if you're not familiar with that, as a new mother who is already under stress for having this baby or whatever, without understanding how postpartum depression manifests itself in men, you'll look at that as, now he's always mad at me and he don't want nothing to do with the family. When that couldn't be further from the truth. He's processing his postpartum depression and trying to figure out how to deal with that. Just as eventually, at some point, maybe not, mom may have to do that too. And dad is going to have to step up and understand how to be supportive there. And then during that period of time, it might have to be 90-10. You know what I mean? Like, dad's going to have to be doing everything while mom just figures out, like, how can I get from day to day and take care of myself and deal with my mental health, right? It goes both ways with that. And we have to recognize and be understanding about that. And then also I talk to my families about, really talk about the roles that you want to play in the relationship in terms of a family. And also, what is a relationship to you? You wouldn't believe how many families that I work with and how many couples I work with that don't understand the difference between a symbiotic relationship, a parasitic relationship, and cohabitating. Three very different things. And the reason that they're important is because a parasitic relationship, one person is dying, one person is not. It is being really, the life is being drained out of them by another person, the other per half in a relationship, who isn't really contributing anything. The symbiotic relationship, both people are feeding each other mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, right? They're both growing. They're both supporting one another. The cohabitating, they both just there, right? There's no sharing there. There's no growing. There's no love. There's no nothing. And this is why it's important, because you can tell kids whatever you want to tell them, but they're going to learn by what they see. And what happens is when your daughter is in the house and she sees that cohabitating, right? Mm-hmm. And not that love, not that symbiotic relationship, she winds up to be a young lady that grows up, gets in a relationship, and is unhappy with a brother who doesn't provide her, who doesn't feed her mentally, emotionally, and physically, right? Or spiritually, but she stays in it. Why? Because she's thinking, well, what's wrong with me? The issue's got to be with me, right? He doesn't cheat on me. He doesn't physically abuse me. He doesn't verbally abuse me, but something is missing. Well, it's because you're cohabitating. There's no sharing of love right there. There's no building with one another there, right? Or you have young cats. Your sons grow up to be young men who grow up and they get in a relationship, and because they are present physically, but they don't have a presence, right? There's a difference between being a present and having a presence. A presence means you're there mentally and emotionally. Being present means that you're just there physically, right? And because he's just present in the relationship with his partner and his kids are there, and he's giving money to the situation, but he's not providing anything else. He's not feeding anybody emotionally. He's not feeding his kids or his partner spiritually or whatnot. all of a sudden, when she expresses displeasure in that and says, you know, I need you to step up and be more here. I need you to be more present here. Instead of understanding, hearing, and listening to what she's saying, all he knows is, well, this is what my daddy did, and this is what my mama and daddy did, and this is supposed to be okay. So instead of hearing that out and listening and working with his partner to help strengthen the relationship and grow and prolong the relationship, you picking on me, right? So now they're arguing and fighting left and right. And without therapy and without a proper understanding of that, now they split up down the line and they trying to figure out who's getting this, who's getting that, how we gonna do custody left and right, and this, that, and other. And so it's why those conversations are important.
You're right, man. You dead on it. And I just read an article about the daughter of Bernie Mac and celebrating how the father figure he was on the screen and how his wife pretty much supported that, whatever. But the daughter was talking about how she ended up feeling that her father influence in her life affected her marriage. And so now not only is she going about celebrating and being a leader of the foundation for Bernie Mac, she's also addressing about the issues of what she went through emotionally because of what she saw versus, what she was being told. And so again, that is something we have to acknowledge because this is what happens to us. We pass it on unknowingly, unconsciously, and then we're wondering about why our children or grandchildren or aunties act a certain kind of way. It's because what they saw, how they was conditioned, as well to the men of how they was conditioned by what they saw, right? So I'm gonna throw this back to you, Brother Dave, and I'm gonna go back to Brother Mark. This is our last one, but I wanna make sure we give a little more perspective before we close out. We get into the deadline, but I wanna make sure that we hear from the doctor.
So super quickly, again, I think Mr. Moore has provided, some serious wisdom along with, brother Mark.
Yeah.
The father-daughter piece, man, is I'm actually finishing up my doctoral dissertation looking at the impact of Black fathers raising daughters. And from a research standpoint, it's very frightening that there's such little discussion in the academic literature about fathers raising daughters. What we do know about fathers who raise daughters and have an active, ongoing relationship with their daughters is that when a dad is involved, it reduces the likelihood that daughters will be sexually active early. It reduces mental health indicators like anxiety and depression, and those girls tend to do better academically. And some of the grassroots work that I've done with fathers, I just helped Fathers Incorporated do a study in Atlanta, Georgia, where we interviewed young fathers, 19, 20-year-old fathers in Atlanta about their relationships with their children. One of the things that came out of that study is a lot of the dads said that they were ill-prepared to be a father, but frightened to be a father of a daughter. And so this work around fathers raising daughters and helping dads understand that this notion of like, I have two daughters. I take my daughters out on dates because I want them to understand what that process, ain't no dude coming up to my house honking a horn and my daughter gonna run outside getting in the car. When you think about the things, and I'll wrap it up really quickly, when you think about the things that dads teach their daughters, man, so critically important, man, so critically important, the things that we teach our daughters.
It is, man. I heard that growing up because I didn't have any sisters and like that, but I remember just hearing in a earshot conversation about an uncle teaching to a niece that you never respond to a man who pull up in your yard and blow the horn at you like that. You know what I'm saying? It's just certain principle things in our community, whatever, that we did. And we took that position as fathers, as uncles, as men, that we set for our women, for our daughters to be respected, which usually is not a lens to what fatherhood is about. We erase that part, right? But I know, Brother Mark, you got a daughter, man, and I seen something a little while ago that I saw how you carried the situation out. We was hanging out one day when I want you to give some perspective of how you feel and what you can contribute to this conversation as pertains to what you've gone through your development as a father with dealing with raising a daughter.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it brief because I know we're running against time here, but I certainly, in my experience, I echoed that sentiment that the doctor just said. I felt ill prepared to have a son, but I was afraid when they told me I was going to have a daughter. Like, I was petrified. Coming from having all male siblings, a lot male cousins for the most part. It really was predominantly males. And so I felt so unprepared to have a daughter. But one of the things that I love about when our Black families are together is so dynamic to see the interaction between a husband and wife and the way that they can rear their children and how they both pour and invest and have this balance. Again, I don't want to rehash, but Brother Williams, I believe it is, man, he was talking about those symbiotic relationships, and you are showing your daughter what she should expect in terms of taking your daughters on dates. You're showing your daughters what to expect, not to honk the horn. And again, I had to have some conversations, even with my wife, that really helped me to understand. I don't even allow my daughter to accept things from men. My daughter's only 8. So, I remember we were at a convention, at a church convention, young church kid, kids around, so on and so forth. And somebody found out it was, her birthday. Somebody said, "Oh, it's her birthday?" She said, "Yeah, it's my birthday." And a young man, probably 19, 20 years old, really who had meant the best, went to give my daughter $20. And my wife and I quickly said, "No, she got to get that back." And the reasoning being, I don't want to set her up from a young age, giving her the thought process that the way to get things or the way to get money or attain things in life is through men. You don't have to go through men to get things in life. One, daddy and mommy will take care of you. And until you get to a place where you can stand on your own 2 feet and be submissive to your own husband, not whatever Tom, Dick, and Harry comes along to be able to just give you something. And so investing those principles into a daughter, and we have to take care of, I feel like I'm backtracking here, but we have to take care of our Black women. We got to take care of their mothers, because what the brother said, it doesn't matter what you say. What you say does not matter. They're not hearing what you say. It's going in one ear and out the other. But how did you treat mama? How did you deal with mama? Was it a symbiotic relationship? Was it cohabitation? And then they get to the point where they expect that very thing, or feel as if they're missing out. I think that brother was spot on, man. Again, this is his wheelhouse, but I'm echoing all of those sentiments. You're absolutely right. And we have to be there as fathers for our daughters. The statistics show that the investment that we put into our daughters will result in so many different areas of improvement. So yes, we got to be there. We got to stand united, and we got to fill in the gap. I'm gonna say for the last time, we got to fill in that gap for those daughters that don't have dad at home, those daughters that don't have a father there for them. We got to fill in those gaps and help to create that capacity, as the brother said. So I'm echoing that sentiment exactly.
Again, I was saying thanks, Brother Williams. Thanks, Brother Dave. Thanks, Brother Mark, for being available and coming on tonight to make sure this is a special time for us to share with our own community and those alike around us. So make sure even when we post that you share it, inbox, make sure that people get a chance to get in this conversation so we can still have it, start having conversations other places to shape and write our own narrative that has been so profoundly expressed today. I would like to thank you again. Thank you so very much for the wisdom, for the insight, for the research. And we speaking it already in ahead of time, Brother Dave. It's Dr. Dave, all right? We put it out there. We appreciate the work and what you're doing. Shout out to Baltimore. Shout out to Michigan. Shout out to Minnesota. We appreciate the perspectives across the world allowing us to have this conversation. And so we learn more as we share with one another. We'd like to remind you as well to learn more about Revive Community Health Center here in Flint, Michigan. Please check us out on Facebook, also at revivechc.org. Don't forget to tune in and to Black Girls Blueprint for Maternal Health during the month of July, as my wife, Executive Director of Revive, Katrina Tillman, will be back to host the Hot Mama Summer Is it the climate change or is it just me? But I appreciate today the guys had a chance to take over this platform and talk from our perspective. But always, please continue to engage with Revive Community Health Center as well with the Black Millennials for Flint on all social media platforms, and share this episode with friends. Good night. God bless you. And Black man, stay strong. Fists up. Take care.